The Appraisal Foundation says that when it chooses not to define a word in a USPAP context, it's because it believes that the standard business context of that particular word is a completely adequate definition. But if you look up the word analyze in various dictionaries, you're going to get various definitions.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out with you once again in the podcast chair. Have a great guest on. It's a guest you love. It's a guest that that you constantly give me shout outs and say, give me more, give me more. Before I introduce him, I want to remind you that we are sponsored by three great companies, OREP being one of them. Folks, I just renewed about a month ago, renewed with OREP, and it could not have been easier. It will be easy for you as well. Check them out. Go to orep.org. Again, it's orep.org. We're sponsored by DataMaster. DataMaster is in the process of helping you to save 30 to 60 minutes per report, and they're continually updating their software and making it even easier on you. Check them out by going to datamasterusa.com. One more time, datamasterusa.com. Finally, we are sponsored by Alamode. Alamode is the program that I use, of course, to save me time and energy because it's technology that works for appraisers. You can find out more by going to alamode.com. One more time, it's alamode.com. Well, folks, I teased it up front. Here he is in the flesh. Mr. Tim Andersen, welcome back to the program, Tim.
Hi, Dustin. It is good to be with you. A great day to you and your family, and especially to our fellow appraisers. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Well, Tim, I love having you on the program because you make me think, and I think you're going to do that today as well. You and I have been talking the last couple of weeks off the air, maybe emailing a little bit, maybe texting a little bit. And I think we even actually spoke on the phone a little bit about this topic. And it's a topic that I'm going to set it up this way, Tim, and just, we as appraisers, and I think just people in general, right? We get used to what we do. We get used to the language that we use. We think we understand the language because it's what we do and it's how we talk and it's the things that we deal with on a regular basis. But how often do we stop and step back and start asking questions like, what does that word actually mean? And the word of the day today, Tim, is analyze. Let's talk about analyze.
Well, let's talk about analyze, analysis, analyses, analytics, all those variations on the word. One of the many parts of USPAP that I find surprising, challenging, interesting, sometimes inspired, and even occasionally just downright stupid, is the fact that for a word as ubiquitous as analyze and its derivations and permutations, USPAP chooses not to define it. Now, the Appraisal Foundation says that when it chooses not to define a word in a USPAP context, it's because it believes that the standard business context of that particular word is a completely adequate definition.
Okay.
All right. Oh, okay. That sounds pretty good to me. But if you look up the word analyze in various dictionaries, you're going to get various definitions. So is the issue that there are various definitions a problem, or is it actually a benefit? Well, if you just look at one definition, it's going to be a problem because not all definitions contain the same components. Whereas if you look at a bunch of definitions, you're going to find that, yes, they have different components. Yes, they come from different directions. But they all have as their base the concept of taking something apart so that the take aparter, the person who's doing the taking apart, comes to understand the components of whatever it is he or she is taking apart. And then once he or she has taken it apart, then they can turn around and put it back together. And in so doing, know what it means.
Gotcha. Okay.
So while I think there ought to be a definition of to analyze, there isn't. And that may be, quite frankly, the appraiser's friend, because it's going to make the appraiser look at various definitions and then from those definitions draw his or her conclusions. However, and as you and I have said before, there's always a however, which definition is an appraiser's state board going to follow? Okay. And since USPAP does not offer one, and since there are 11 out there, your state board, you may decide, well, I really like the definition of to analyze in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, but the state board may like the definition of to analyze in Black's Law dictionary. So to which definitional standard is the appraiser being held? And again, I have no trouble with multiple definitions. The problem I have is which definition is the state board going to use as it listens to an appraiser, and if it chooses to impose a sanction, which definition is the state board going to use to impose that sanction? That's the issue I have.
Okay. And this is important because USPAP, of course, uses the word analyze, analysis more than one time, right?
Oh, my word. If I did a word search for analysis, analyze, analyses, analytics, and Dustin, it's just all over the place. Now, obviously, some of those are in context of standards, which mean nothing to us. Standard 9 and 10. Okay, sure. Those mean nothing to us as real estate appraisers. But even if you take those out of the mix, the words are just all over the place. Standard 1, Standard 2, the FAQs, the AOs, and there is no definition. Perhaps there's a description, and we'll get to that as we discuss this, but there is no specific definition despite the ubiquity of the word.
Okay. Can you give us an example? Because, as an appraiser, I use the word analysis, I use the word analyze. From a USPAP perspective, though, how is this word used that makes it pretty important that appraisers understand what it is and what's required of them?
Well, let's take Standard Rule 1-4. Which is basically where the analyses begin. There are analyses in Standard 1-3, the highest and best use standard, but Standard Rule 1-3 does not use the word analysis. Whereas in Standard Rule 1-4, it says the appraiser will collect, verify, and analyze all information necessary for credible assignment results. Great. I completely agree. That is the appraiser's challenge. But then what does it mean to analyze it?
Yeah. In other words,
does it mean list it on a form? Does it mean take it apart mathematically? What does it mean? And that is not a component of an appraiser's education unless an appraiser has been to college and then tended to study something that is more scientifically oriented.
In other words, we are being not asked but required as real estate, as licensed, certified, what have you, and those that have licenses were required by USPAP to, in most states. In fact, I don't think, is there any state out there, Tim, that you know of, or any jurisdiction that doesn't use USPAP as a basis for their state law?
As of this recording, no.
Okay. So we've got states out there that basically rely on this document. Therefore, appraisers have to rely on this document. And this document very specifically says that we're required to analyze. And yet there's no real definition of what analyze means. What about with the GSEs? Talk to me about what they require when it comes to analysis.
Well, same thing with the GSEs. They require analysis. Obviously, because that's what we have to report on the various forms, the 1004 form. But yet the GSEs, too, don't have a specific definition of to analyze or analysis or analyses or analytical. Therefore, because it's not taught in qualifying education. It's definitely not taught in continuing education. Therefore, the appraiser is kind of off on his or her own to figure out what's going on from the standpoint of, well, okay, what do I have to analyze? And now that I found what I have to analyze, how do I analyze it?
Right. Okay. So let's talk about some definitions then. I know in preparation for this, you looked up some definitions, and I would say credible definitions, meaning that, the sources are credible. We're not looking up Joe's Appraiser Dictionary or Urban Dictionary, as the case may be. I mean, these are credible dictionary sources. Let's talk about them, because I would think that most appraisers listening are going to say, okay, well, come on, Tim. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that there's slightly different definitions between this source and that source, but they really, everybody knows what the word analyze means, right?
Okay. For example, here is one definition. A systematic examination and evaluation of data or information by breaking it into its component parts to uncover their interrelationships. Another one is the process of breaking a complex topic or substance into smaller parts in order to gain a better understanding of it. And now that is a definition of an analysis. For example, a definition of analyze is to study something in a systematic and careful way, or to separate a material or an abstract entity, and an appraisal is an abstract entity, into constituent parts or elements to determine the elements of the essential features thereof, along those lines. So basically the question is, oh, great, fine, I have to discover what the component parts are. How do I discover what the component parts are? Typically, and this is for good or evil, depending on how you look at mathematics, but typically you take something apart mathematically, especially with what we do, because what we do is so numbers oriented. Therefore, we have to be able to take stuff apart mathematically. And of course, the ideal way to do that is via calculus, which is why Leibniz and Newton invented it. We don't go that far now, lest somebody think I have a clue what I'm talking about when it comes to calculus.
I was preparing myself to be impressed.
Don't. My knowledge of calculus is it's hard. Okay. So, and while it's a little deeper than that, it's not a whole lot deeper than that. So fortunately, at our level, we don't need calculus. Now, if you get into the really academic stuff, they throw all this calculus in there to impress other PhDs.
Sure.
But from what we do, add, subtract, multiply, and divide is pretty much going to do it.
Gotcha.
But we have to know what to add and what to subtract and what to multiply and divide before we can apply those tools to the data to tell us what they really mean.
See, and that's one of the things I noticed in I think all of the definitions that you were giving there. And I was only listening with one ear, Tim, but I did hear.
You're pretending you're my wife.
I did hear a lot about parts and about breaking parts or separating parts, and I found that regardless of the definition source, that was a consistency. That analyzing is all about taking parts and breaking them down. And as you astutely questioned here, what are those parts? So let's talk about it. In your opinion, what parts should an appraiser be concerned about taking apart and understanding how they fit together?
Well, for example, let's take your basic purchase and sale contract. Let's just at $200,000. Okay. So what that is telling us is all of the component parts of that purchase and sale agreement total $200,000. We got the answer. It's $200,000. Okay. Therefore, what's the question?
It's like Jeopardy, right?
It's like playing Jeopardy, right? We've got the answer. Now we've got to reverse engineer the questions. So, all right, how much emphasis does the market put on a swimming pool? How much emphasis did that particular buyer put on a swimming pool? How much emphasis did the buyer put on the view? How much emphasis does the market put on a view? Now, it's usually possible to take stuff like this apart. But what's interesting is the only approach to value that is deeply mathematically oriented and I put deeply in quotes, is the cost approach, because that's the only one that seeks to break down the property into its individual cost components. Now, cost doesn't equal value. We understand that.
Sure.
And you and I have debated that issue both on and off the air. But for
You've
example,
always won, by the way. You always win.
Well, okay. Now you don't sound like my wife. Okay,
I got to play both sides here.
So, but what we've got here is, okay, it's up to us to say, well, how much did the buyer assign to this component of value? And again, one of the best ways to do that, in fact, technically the only way to do that, is via the cost approach supported by some type of a paired sales analysis or regression analysis or something along those lines.
Gotcha. So, and here's this word again, so we've come full circle. The way to do that, obviously, is to analyze or break apart and understand. Isn't the grid kind of doing that as well? You talked about the cost approach, and I certainly get what you're saying, breaking it up into individual components. Aren't we trying to do that with the sales comparison approach too, and break out that swimming pool, break out that second bedroom, break out that extra acre?
Okay, the second page of the form, the sales comparison, the sales comparison grid is not an analytical tool. It's a reporting tool. In order to report it, we must have already done it. Therefore, the grid, while it helps us to keep the individual components straight, does not in and of itself lend itself to analysis, as would, say, figuring out what a acre of ground with a mountain view versus an acre of ground with a park view is worth. And theoretically, the difference between the two, is the value of the mountain view. So we can take that apart, and if we need to, we can add it to a sale that doesn't have it, or subtract it from a sale that does. And that's how we do it. Now, I know we're a little bit short on time today, so I'll try to quit yammering on mindlessly. Try. If you read USPAP long enough, and let's face it, there are only about 440 people in the entire world that read it to any great length, and those are USPAP instructors, and we're all geeks. So if you read USPAP long enough and deeply enough, what you come to understand, again, via no definition, but the context of the USPAP document itself, what you come to understand is, by analysis, USPAP means basically a side-by-side comparison. So you take all the sites with mountain views and all the sites without mountain views, and you compare them side by side. And that comparison indicates what a mountain view is worth in the market. Now, there are other ways to execute side-by-side comparisons. You pick up the phone and call 5 brokers and say, okay, what's a mountain view site worth? And you pick up the phone and call 5 other brokers. What's a site without a mountain view worth? Okay, there's a side-by-side comparison. Or you take, for example, the cost approach, and you look at the construction cost of a Q1 house versus the construction cost of a Q2 house, and all other things being equal, that is the difference in quality. Now, is the market going to always going to interpret differences in quality according to a costing manual? No, it isn't. But that is one way of many ways to discover a quality difference. If we go back to standard 1-1, which is an extension of the competency rule, the competency rule says, appraiser, thou shalt understand all of the necessary appraisal protocols you need to use to come up with a credible value opinion. And that's what standard 1 says. Therefore, if one way of determining the difference in qualities of construction is to look at costing services, then you have to understand how to do that. And if you don't, then you need to learn how, so that you can apply that appraisal protocol in order to end up with credible assignment results.
We're speaking with Tim Andersen, USPAP instructor extraordinaire, appraiser extraordinaire. When we get back, Tim, I want to talk to you about how technology plays into this, and especially big data. And I also want to talk to you about the boots on the ground tactical, how this applies to an appraiser's life day by day, and just chat with you just a little bit about that, and maybe one or two takeaways that the average appraiser can start changing today that can help them to become a better appraiser and when we get back from the break. First, want to pause here, of course, and remind you of some other ways that you can become a better appraiser, and that is allowing a la mode to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. That's right. A la mode is not just a form-filling software. It's a form-filling software with all kinds of a treasure trove, as they say, of tools that can help you to be more efficient, more effective, and to help you, analyze the information that's in front of you. Check them out. Go to alamode.com, or you can call them at Alamode. Speaking of another great technology that allows you to save time, save energy, and to work smarter, it's DataMaster. DataMaster, if they are in your area, folks, will save you 30 to 60 minutes per report. Now, why do I say if they're in your area? Well, DataMaster does it right. They don't just screen scrape information. They don't go in the back door. They come through the front door. I know that firsthand because I've dealt with Rick, and I know that his ethics are high, and he will get a contract with each and every board of realtors that he's wanting to work with. That's the kind of company that they are, and they will help you to be a better appraiser. Check them out by going to datamasterusa.com. One more time, it's datamasterusa.com. Finally, we are sponsored by OREP Insurance. OREP is the insurance that I use for my E&O. Why? Well, for several reasons. First of all, the benefits are enormous. Check out their website for that. But second of all, it is super easy every year to renew. We're talking less than a 3-minute application process. It is very, very easy. They do all the work because they are brokers and they will shop around. And reason number 3, every year that I've used them, they've saved me money over the competition. Check them out. Go to orep.org. That's OREP.org. And welcome back to the program, folks. We're with Tim Andersen. Welcome back, Tim.
Hi, Dustin. How are you?
I'm very good, very good. I want to pause here before we jump back into the practical and tactical here, and just talk with you a little bit. One of the reasons I have you on is because you are so smart. The other reason I have you on is because you are so good looking. Most people can't see you; they're listening. But the third reason that I have you on is that I want appraisers to understand that you don't just keep your smarts to yourself, that you provide a service. It is a pay or fee-based service, but you provide a service to appraisers out there. Tell us a little bit more about what you do for my fellow appraisers across the nation.
Dustin, I will pontificate at length on anything.
Love it.
Dustin, again, for those of you who can't see me, consider it a blessing. You'd see all my gray hair. So I've been doing this since the previous millennium and have a little experience in it. And therefore, I am able to help my fellow appraisers with assignments that they have with USPAP questions, USPAP challenges, questions or challenges with or about state boards, questions or challenges with appraisal protocols, appraisal techniques, the whys behind some of this. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure to help my fellow appraisers. I have the time now because I'm out of the retail end of the appraisal business.
Right. You're not working for AMCs on a daily basis.
Exactly. I have not sat down and written an appraisal in 5 years. Now, have I helped write a lot of appraisals in the interim? Yeah, but I mean, to sit down and be Joe Appraiser, it's been almost 5 years.
Okay. All right.
And so I guess you could say I'm semi-retired. And in my semi-retirement, what I do is I help my fellow appraisers, and I'm glad to do so.
Lovely. And you've helped several of my Mastermind students, my Appraiser Academy students, my All-Star team, and listeners to this program. And one of the services that I love that you provide is not just when people get in trouble with their state boards, which, let's face it, and luckily that doesn't happen very often. But one of the things that appraisers can do is prevent that from happening by sitting down with you and sending you several copies of their typical appraisals and say, hey, Tim, read through this and tell me where I'm deficient. Tell me where I'm redundant. Tell me where I can change and make my appraisal report better understood by the reader. And you help them with that service as well.
I will be, yes, I do. And I will be happy to do it in the future.
Love it. Love it. Okay, well, let's jump back into Analyze. We've got just a couple of minutes left here. Let's talk first of all big data. How does big data play into this word Analyze, and more specifically, how an appraiser approaches the analysis of an appraisal process?
Well, for example, I was at a presentation recently, and the speaker put a map on the overhead, and this map showed the location of bars. And what was interesting is it also showed the location of relatively lower priced real estate. And there was a direct correlation between the closeness of a bar and the lower priced real estate. In other words, the further away you were from a bar, the higher price of real estate.
Right.
And can you get that from not analyzing big data? Yeah, you can. But it would take too long, and quite frankly, you wouldn't do it because you're not getting paid for it.
Right.
Whereas if you had access to big data, so you could correlate those data, which is not difficult, assuming you have the data to correlate and assuming you have the right programs, then you would be able to show that that obviously bars in that particular neighborhood are exerting an influence on the market. And one of the influences those bars are influencing is, for what reasons I don't understand, I didn't ask the question, but for whatever reason in that particular neighborhood, proximity to a bar resulted in a lower value.
Talk to me, Tim, about then how does this apply? I know a lot of appraisers are concerned about their job moving forward. Would you be so bold? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you be so bold as this word and analysis, that really is kind of what separates us from the computer?
Yeah, I mean, the computers are great at analysis. I mean, basically all regression analysis is a paired sales cubed.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It just says, okay, let me find two properties that are really close to each other in everything except one thing. And then it takes that adjustment and then applies it where necessary. It says, okay, now that we've got these the same, let's look at other differences. That's all regression analysis does, and it does it mathematically. We don't need to worry about the math because we've got the programs to do it. And you don't want to see the math, and you don't ever want to have to do the math.
Right.
Not hard, just voluminous.
But being an appraiser, understanding markets, understanding real estate, understand how those intricacies work together, that gives us a leg up to say, okay, let's look at the math, let's look at the numbers, and now let's analyze and pick apart and understand what they're telling us.
Well, I recently helped an appraiser with an assignment, and it was in a particular subdivision in which there are some lakes. And the lakes are quite pretty, and you just ignore the alligators. And of course, all the brokers are saying, well, yeah, it's this property lakefront, therefore it's worth more. Well, one of the things we found via regression analysis is no, they weren't. The lakefront meant nothing. People wanted the overall location of that particular subdivision. They cared less about the fact that you could look at a lake, because the thing is, these are many of the properties in the subdivision were 2 stories. From the second story, unless you were standing on the balcony, you couldn't see the lakes, and the balconies weren't that big. So you're not going to sit out there and take the evening sun on the balcony. And besides, if you've ever sat in Florida in the summer in the evening sun, you don't want to sit in Florida in the summer in the evening sun. You learn that in about a minute and a half. So what our broker friends were selling water frontage, but yet the data indicated that really didn't mean anything to the typical buyer.
Yeah. Would you, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you say that the word analyze or analysis really takes us to the why and not just the what? Yeah. So in other words, your analogy of this bar situation, that you can show the what. The what is that real estate surrounding a bar is worth less, and it's worth more the further that you get away from the bar. But it doesn't answer the question as to why that is. That's where the appraiser comes in. That's where
the appraiser has got to pick up the phone and say, okay, broker, you just sold this house. It was located next to the bar, and it sold for property. It sold less for a highly similar property 3 blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah.
And the broker says, well, they get a lot of police calls and a lot of sirens at night. Okay, there's the answer to the question right there.
Right. The analysis side. Okay, interesting. So let's, as we part ways here, Tim, as we close things up, what's the takeaway for appraisers? Okay, fine. Well, we use the word analysis. We use the word analyze. We do that. We're required by USPAP on most of what we do to analyze what we're doing. So what? What's the takeaway for you and I? Mostly for me, because you said you're not in the day-to-day of writing up reports. So what's the takeaway for me and my listeners?
Well, the takeaway, Dustin, for the boots on the ground appraiser is that the forms we use do not promote analysis. They are asking us merely to report the results of our analyses. But way too often, appraisers merely want to place data on the form. For example, let's look at sales history. We are supposed to go back, and if the property is sold within the last 3 years, analyze if it was an arm's length transaction. Well, the only way to do that is to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hi, was this an arm's length transaction? And if they say yes, then you have analyzed the sale. It's an arm's length transaction. If they say no, then you say, may I ask why? And if they choose to answer you, which they don't have to do, then they say, oh, yeah, it was part of a divorce. Oh, okay, well, that definitely was not an arm's length transaction. Thank you very much. And now you know. Now we know. Okay. One thing I want to know is how we get a hold of you as listeners. Let's say we're interested in those services that we mentioned earlier. What's the best way for an appraiser to reach Mr. Tim Andersen? Dustin, I have two email addresses via which appraisers can contact me. Tim@theappraisersadvocate.com or Tim@theuspapexpert.com. And my phone number is area code 561-635-5265. And I will be happy to chat with my fellow appraisers. And if I can help them, I will be happy to do that too.
Tim Andersen, USPAP expert, great friend of mine. Thank you for being on the program, my friend. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you helping appraisers understand what the word analyze means in analysis. And now, folks, our commission is to go out there and do it, to be better than the computers. We're not AVMs. We are appraisers. And as such, we educate and understand and help others to understand as well. Thank you for joining me, folks, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.
Testing 1, 2. Test 1, 2, 3. Let's turn this up. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test. I guess it's just volume. Test 1, 2, 3.
Okay, now don't go away.
All right, I'm here.
I got my headphones and my phone plugged in. Now I got to plug the microphone in, and because I can't transfer the acoustics, we're probably going to have lousy acoustics.
That's all right. Listeners are very forgiving.
Well,
if the content's good.
Nice, Dustin.
Yeah, well, as long as the content's good, that's all we care about.
Okay, just a minute now. Okay, hang on. Wow. Okay. Okay, we're going here. Oh, come on, let's go.
I shouldn't laugh, but, you know.
No, go ahead and laugh, Dustin, because
I'm not.
I set this thing up, and I said, okay, we're going to give this a try. And I mean, the whole thing's falling apart. All right, HTT. I'm on another computer now.
Okay, you're going to have to click something.
Just yeah, start video. Okay, I'm starting. Oh, that's just lovely.
I thought you were hanging from the ceiling. I thought, man, that's impressive at your age.
Yeah,
Nice.
yes, it is. Unfortunately, why? That's just stupid.
That's awesome. I think you ought to leave it that way. It makes it much more interesting.
Oh, what a load of garbage.
Talk to me about. Sorry, Tim. Man, I thought I got it all coughed out in the mute button.
That's okay. The editor. The
editor's great. It'll make a great Easter egg for the end.
Yep.
They'll know we're human, right? All right. Let's try this again.